Dr. Rama and Dr. Shailendra Kumar. Very good afternoon to all of you. Am I audible, Rama?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Today we are here to discuss a very live issue, which is the whole business of reforming agricultural markets. Mostly the regulatory part, though there could be also policy reforms. And as you know, the protests which are ongoing. Therefore, I'm sure all of you are interested in discussing this issue and gaining some new insights from this interaction we have. So what I plan to do is I would spend about 30-40 minutes to take you through some of the issues, highlight some of the major aspects of what has been attempted last year by the Government of India and raise issues there, and maybe also take you towards what is the kind of way forward if we have to carry on reforming markets. So as you can see, this is the topic of our discussion. Yeah. Generally, people talk about 3 farm bills or farm acts. I generally call them 2.5 because there are only 2 which are new and which are more controversial because they were never legislated at the union level. They were always state acts. And the third one is only an amendment to an already existing central act, which is ECA, Essential Commodities Act, which has been liberalized, or the provisions have been relaxed in terms of imposition of stock limits in order to contain prices and ensure availability of food to people at large in this country at reasonable prices. So generally, I don't talk much about ECA, but if there is interest, I can spend a few minutes on that. But main focus would be on these 2 new acts, which have been framed for the first time in the form of ordinances, first in June, and then bills, and then enacted into laws. And then we have been having a lot of discussion and debate, and also this negotiation between farmers and the government. Government thinks that this is all for the good of farmers. Farmers are not convinced about it, as represented by their unions. So if you see these 2 pictures, they tell you what the 2 acts, what they are about. So one you see is a kind of marketplace. You see some bags of produce, and you see some farmers, and that is like auction of farm produce in a mandi, APMC mandi, Agriculture Produce Market Committee, the process which discovers prices for the farmer produce. The one on the right side is, you can see, a farm, which is about contract farming. So as you can see, one new law is more about dealing with the market part of the farmers' produce in terms of creating a new system or new place. The other one is going to the farm in terms of interacting with the farmer to get something produced which a buyer is interested in. So you can see the right side is more serious because it takes the, what I call, takes the mandi to the farm. Yeah, left side is still, you're talking about mandi, marketplace. But it's not that these things were not there in this country. They were there. All this was already happening on the ground with the help of state APMC acts, Agriculture Produce Market Committee acts, which each state has, because agriculture has been, as per the Constitution of India, a state subject, agriculture and agricultural markets. So different states have been reforming their markets at the instruction of union government in the form of model acts which were being handed out earlier, saying do this way, do that way. Since 2003, and some states were doing it on their own also. But now there is one set of laws which say that in this country there'll be only one way of regulating or promoting agricultural markets or agricultural marketing. So that has also created some concerns on the federal issues, yeah, the federal aspects of our constitution, saying whose job is it to reform agricultural markets or deal with agricultural markets. I think I've not made it a PowerPoint. Yeah. So let me first talk a little bit about the context, which is very important to understand. Some of you, I'm told that all of you are economists and therefore you may be knowing, but if there is some concern that what is that we are talking about, we are basically talking about a place called APMC Mandi, Sabji Mandi, Dana Mandi, Anaj Mandi, whatever name different states people have for this. And the whole story of reform starts with that. In the 1990s, a lot of newspaper articles and news items saying that these mandis, which were set up under the APMC Acts in different states, in order to give a physical place for people to come and transact, farmers coming there to sell and buyers coming there to buy. And these mandis are run as per the Act, which means every activity is specified in terms of what will be done by whom. There are stakeholders, there are players in that market, whether buyers as traders or commission agents, traders as Pakka Aadhiyas, commission agents as Kacha Aadhiyas, and the role of the APMC, Agriculture Produce Market Committee, which I call it a multi-stakeholder democratically elected body. Yeah, a lot of people are calling APMC Mandi committees as Sarkari committees or Sarkari Mandis. They are not Sarkari. They are Sarkari to the extent that they are run by an act, which I think everybody in this country runs goes by some law. Yeah, whether there's a Consumer Protection Act or there is some other act, everybody has to behave by the law of the land. Similarly, these committees are also constituted and operate as per the provisions of the APMC Act, which came in the 1960s or early 70s in different states. So to me, that was a half truth, saying that APMCs have become monopolies, that they're not letting anything happen. So that was not the whole story, because if you look at different states, somewhere states APMCs have played a very significant role in helping farmers sell their produce. In others, they have tried, but maybe not that successful. Some others have not. So this picture is mixed in terms of the performance of these regulated mandis, yeah, APMCs. And there is also diversity in this country. Punjab and Haryana farmers can't think beyond mandi. Everybody sells there. There are so many mandis in a small state like Punjab. There are at least 150 big mandis, and then at the time of procurement, they set up more than 1,000 or sometimes 2,000 purchase centers, even in small villages, because there's so much of this produce which comes. So you just can't take it in one place. So, and then you have some other states in central India, where you don't have that kind of vibrant sort of functioning of, but they're still playing a role. You have Kerala, which has no APMC ever since beginning, because Kerala doesn't grow the kind of crops, which we handle at APMC seasonally. Kerala has commodity boards. Kerala has auction markets for cardamom or other products and so on, because the plantation crops, not field crops. And Bihar, now, Bihar doesn't have any regulation of markets. Yeah, they abolished the APMC Act altogether in 2006 instead of amending it, unlike many other states. Yeah, when the government asked the states to reform those markets. Yeah, and as I said earlier, there are fruit and vegetable markets, or you can call them sabji mandis, or you can call them wet markets, perishable produce markets, and the others are grain markets or cereals markets. Yeah, and this reform thing has been going on, as I said earlier, because after the industrial sector reforms, service sector reforms, banking sector reforms, it thought that if agriculture has to also move forward, then we also need to open up this sector so that we could take it along. So in 2003, for the first time, this APMC Model Act came in. Before that, technically, under the APMC Act, any transaction outside the mandi, which meant each mandi committee had a notified area, either a district or a block or a taluka or a tehsil, and notified set of crops. So if it was a notified area transaction and a notified crop involved in that transaction, then nobody could undertake that transaction as a buyer or a seller without the knowledge of the committee or approval of the committee. If you did anything outside their permission, then you are doing an illegal activity. So it was said that how can you have only one entity or one place to deal with all the transactions? Like many other sectors got freedom, farmers as sellers and buyers as purchasers of farm produce also need freedom. So we should have more channels of interaction with the farmer so far as handling of farmer produce was concerned. So the 2003 Act for the first time opened or recommended allowing for 3 more channels, which was direct purchase, contract farming, and private wholesale markets. Direct purchase meant that now buyers could go to the farmers to purchase directly from them without going through the mandi after taking permission from the APMC committee. You may still have to pay mandi fees and charges and other things, but you would be allowed to go and pick up directly from farmer's doorstep or his farm. The contract farming thing was that it was going on earlier also without any sort of regulation because we in this country we don't have a facility of corporate farming. Contract farming and corporate farming are 2 different systems. Nobody in India can undertake corporate farming. That is a non-farmer, non-agriculturist undertaking farming as a commercial activity, whether on owned land or leased land. That is even today banned in most states because we have 2 laws at the state level. One is called ceilings on land holdings, under which a farmer also cannot own more than certain acres of land. Different states have different ceilings. And there are also restrictions on land leasing. Tenancy is banned or restricted. So by law in this country, even if a company wants to undertake farming, it can't. Therefore, the corporate farming option is closed for anybody, any commercial entity. If they want to get something produced which is not available in the market, then you have to necessarily go to farmers to undertake contract farming. So all the seed production in this country has been through contract farming since the 1950s, including by the National Seeds Corporation, State Seeds Corporation, private companies, multinationals, and whatnot. Special arrangements were made to bring in companies like Pepsi into Punjab in 1989 in order to get new technology, get new market linkages, and so on. So all this has been happening in this country even before we formally undertook reforms from 2003 onwards. So 2003, states started amending their acts on the lines of Model APMC Act 2003. Some states allowed all 3 channels, some states allowed 2, some states allowed 1, and some states didn't move at all for some years. Yeah. And around the same time, the UPA government at that time also came out with a new agenda. They said, these fruits and vegetables are perishable produce. They should not be made to go through the APMC system because our infrastructure is not good. The hygiene is not there in sabji mandis, whether Azadpur or Vashi or district level mandis in different states. So you should not subject this produce to this kind of regulation. They should be a notified set of commodities. Fruits and vegetables should be denotified from the APMC regulation. That let people deal in it the way they want to. The picture you are seeing are from Azadpur, yeah, Delhi, vegetable market. So they started asking states informally. There's no law there saying that delist fruits and vegetables because this is a growing sector. We need to encourage it, give freedom of trade there. So a lot of states started exempting fruits and vegetables from regulation and from charging any fees or charge cess or whatever. And this, what we are discussing today, also was discussed in 2008, 2009. Yeah, what has been attempted now was also attempted at that, but didn't really go beyond a few people. And it was sort of worried there, saying that this is not the kind of right thing to do. So then we move into this last decade, and 2017, again, the government thought that things are not moving at the pace they should have moved. We are not opening up enough of agriculture markets, and we are not opening in all the ways at the speed it should be opened also. So they came out with another model act where they also added livestock to it. Earlier it was the Agriculture Produce Market Committee Act, Model Act 2003. 2017, they came out another model act, which was titled Agriculture Produce and Livestock Markets, brackets, Promotion and Facilitation Act. So from regulation, the objective became promotion and facilitation of markets. And then they also thought that since contract farming is not happening on a large scale, maybe one of the reasons is that these APMCs are not interested in giving contract farming permissions to companies, because if they do that, the produce will not come to market, and therefore you may lose some of the commission. And sometimes you also have to exempt them from market fees in order to incentivize them to work directly with farmers to get whatever crops they want to produce. So they called it conflict of interest, and they took out contract farming from the APLM Act and made a separate act on this called Model Contract Agriculture Produce Contract Farming, Agriculture and Livestock Produce Contract Farming and Services Promotion and Facilitation Act, 2018. Yeah. And that they picked up this idea of taking out contract farming from the APMC domain, regulatory domain. They picked it up from Punjab. Punjab had not amended the APMC Act adequately even until 2017. They had done a little bit of tinkering in 2007, but not really much. And in fact, in 2013, for various reasons, which we can discuss later, they came out with a separate act on contract farming. Punjab Contract Farming Act 2013, which they never operationalized. No rules were framed. They provided for the institution of a contract farming commission and 3 commissioners, but they never brought it to the ground. The government of India picked up this idea from there and said, we will also want to have a separate contract farming act. So then they handed over this to states again, and then perhaps they ran out of patience, saying that the market opening is not happening at the speed and the spread it should happen. By the year 2018, some 20 major states had allowed contract farming, had allowed direct purchase. All your food supermarkets, whether Reliance Fresh or Birla's More or Bharti Easy Day or Spencer's or Namdari, everybody, they're all buying from farmers their fruits and vegetables with direct purchase licenses taken from the APMCs. Since last 15 years, they have been doing that, some even for 20 years. So that has been happening. Contract farming has been happening. So 20 major states allowed most of the provisions of the Model Act 2003 and also Model APLM Act 2017, whether a single license for the whole state or e-trading or even private wholesale markets. Though the fact of life is that private wholesale market didn't come up in any state other than Maharashtra. Maharashtra is the only state where you have a few dozen private wholesale markets. So then the government in 2009, late 19, early 20 started thinking of taking over, saying that we want to now have this one nation, one market kind of agenda, that everybody will have to follow the same rules. You can't keep waiting for people to reform markets. It's already too late. We are losing time. And then, as you know, the all hell broke. Yeah. So these three ordinances came during pandemic. Um, then it was taken to the bill stage and then passed in parliament. So there are a lot of these process issues as well. But the fact of life is that we have the two new and one amended act from the central government today, which we need to sort of examine. Why I have shared this slide with you, because it's important to know the background, because there's also this, generally I don't mix up regulation and policy issues when I talk about these acts, but on the ground there's a mixing up. It's already linked to MSP, yeah, minimum support price, which is declared by the government for 23 crops every year, half crops in Kharif season and half in Rabi season, besides sugarcane, which has FRP, fair and remunerative price, and government buys rice and wheat and some other crops from different places. So some states are completely dependent on MSP, for example, Punjab and large parts of Haryana as well. Similarly, some states in South for rice, they're dependent on MSP. So that is also linked up. We will talk about that only if we get enough time. But the take here is that if you look at the markets, APMC markets, it's not the APMC markets are the channel. If you look back of data of 1980s, 90s, or even now, most of the produce, majority of the produce doesn't pass through APMC despite having regulation. It's only 30-40% produce which goes through the regulatory mandi APMC system. The rest is just managed by private traders at the local level, aggregated from farmers and then sold inside or outside mandi or directly to traders and processors and so on. So that is the kind of picture. The two channels which are about these two acts, that is direct purchase and contract farming, that we need to know. These are the pictures of India's food supermarkets. Yeah, Reliance Fresh and Birla's More and so on. This shows you how the produce comes to their collection centers. It is no different from the produce comes to mandis, sabji mandis. Hardly any difference. Yeah, in terms of whether wastage has gone down or quality has improved or whatever. And these guys just buy A grade and leave the B, C, D for the farmer to manage. And they pay the price, which is APMC mandi price, previous evening price, plus minus transport cost, and maybe a few paisa more per kg or whatever. That is how it functions. Yeah, even they discover their prices by looking at the APMC price when they buy directly from farmers in local areas by opening up collection centers. This is the pictures from contract farming projects in different states. Yeah, contract farming has been going on, but there have been various issues, whether in terms of prices for the farmer or the nature of contracts or the small farmers not being part of it, most crops in most areas being outside the net of contract farming. Mostly contracting companies work with the top 10, 15, 20% of the Indian farming households who are relatively large. And there are issues of labor, there are child labor, gender gap in wages, low wages, because nobody monitors these things. Even if you are doing contract farming for a multinational company, which is exporting, the situation on the contract farm is no different from an ordinary farm most of the time. Yeah, the companies have been defaulting on the contract, farmers have been defaulting. Yeah, so there are all kinds of examples of how it has behaved, and regulation has not really kept pace with. There are states which have allowed contract farming, but if you ask them how many companies are doing contract farming with how many farmers in how many acres in which crop, they won't be able to tell you. Yeah. So what are the stated objectives of these reforms? Yeah. One is this one nation, one market thing, guys. Somehow they're worried that we have not been able to integrate agricultural markets in India spatially across different places. So this kind of central legislation can do that, because if you were amending APMCs at state level, you were still doing at state level. what about interstate movement of agriculture produce? Which anyway, for your information, it is a central subject, union list subject. Only union could have taken a call on that. That was never in dispute. And people have been moving produce for the last at least 25, 30 years from one state to another, where skinos from Punjab going to Bangalore, or lychees from Bihar going all over the place in India, grapes from Maharashtra serving whole of India's population, and so on. So there have been no major issues there. And one of the objectives being mentioned is that it was to give choice to farmers, channel choice, that farmers could sell whomever they wanted to sell. The ground reality is that farmers never felt constrained, because they don't even know whether they are doing illegal or legal activity when they sell to somebody in most parts of India. Yeah, the issue was that the buyer was not. If you were a well-known registered company, reputed buyer, then you were doing an illegal activity if you're buying directly from farmers. So buyer freedom was restricted, because you had to go through the mandi to take a license or permission or whatever. So to that extent, you can say seller freedom was also restricted, because buyer was not free to go to buy directly without taking a permission from the APMC. But there are also states like Madhya Pradesh, which the one question one can ask is, did farmers ask for this channel choice? And we have example of Madhya Pradesh, which also abolished the Artiya system, or the commission agent system, in 1985 itself. Yeah, nobody asked, but they somehow thought that this was not good for the farmers. And farmers in Madhya Pradesh since 1985 have been selling directly to buyers, including Government of India, FCI, CCI, and others. Yeah. The second objective is barrier-free interstate trade. As I said, it's a union list subject, and that is not part of what has become an issue. So the question is, was barrier-free intrastate trade a problematic issue within the state? Because states were reforming their markets, allowing more free movement or transactions in agriculture produce across markets, across districts, across mandis. And another objective is e-trading. That this bill, they say they will promote more of e-trading. E-trading is already going on with the setting up of ENAM, Electronic National Agriculture Market, which was being run through APMC mandis, starting with Karnataka, that each mandi was being given 70 lakh rupees by the Government of India to set up systems, computers and internet connections and so on, and display boards, where any trader sitting anywhere can bid on farmers a lot of produce, and then farmer can decide whether he or she wants to sell or not. And minimum 3 traders are supposed to bid before a lot can be auctioned finally. Yeah. So that there have been various issues in the performance of ENAM. Somewhere system not working, somewhere traders opposing it, somewhere farmers not understanding it, somewhere outside traders not being interested, and so on. So they said this kind of central one kind of act for the whole country maybe will facilitate that as well. And more importantly, which is the crux of the matter, is that the government says that it can't invest any more in agricultural markets. For your information, India has had 7,000 plus APMC markets since last 40 years. It has not increased. Only some of them have gone out of business because nobody adequately invested or expanded these marketplaces. The estimates from the government committees are that India needs at least 42,000 APMC markets to give the facility to each farmer within 5 kilometers of his or her residence of selling the produce. And we have only 7,500 or 300, 7,000 plus. Yeah, some main markets and some sub markets. So the government's major objective is that if you open up these channels where private sector can participate in agricultural transactions, then it will bring new investments. The question I generally ask here is, can deregulation alone bring it? Yeah. Do investments come because you relax the legal provisions, or investments come because you incentivize investments? We'll discuss this point when we assess the acts. Now, as I said earlier, I would quickly finish the ECA. Essential Commodities Act 1955 amended last year as ECA Amendment 2020. It is a central act. The only issues here, process issues, are that generally it's written in the act that when the government would like to add or delete any commodity from the essential commodity list, it would consult the states. So this time it was not done. Yeah. And the other part is that the way it has been relaxed, now the government will not intervene in any food market until the cereal or non-perishable prices go up to 50% of the previous year, previous 5 years average retail price. And it will not intervene in perishables unless the prices double, horticulture prices double over the previous year or 5-year average. So issue there is this opening up too much? Are these limits too much? Will the government wait now for the cereal prices to be 49.9% before it says, I will not allow anybody to stock or hold the produce to realize higher prices later on? Or would it wait for onion prices to go up to 99.9% above the previous year's average before it intervenes? So that is this is the issue which is being talked by some of the farmer unions, saying this is not good for the food security of the poor, because it lead to food inflation. People will not be able to afford adequate access to food. They'll have to pay through their nose, because despite all the food security we talk about, food surpluses we talk about, FCI godowns overflowing we talk about, for the last 55 years, the increase in per capita availability of cereals is only 26 grams per person per day, or just 6%. Yeah, and pulses it is actually just 14 grams, and this is actually 22% lower, and we are highly dependent on imports. Yeah, so would it really help people to afford more if you allow prices to go up, and you will not be able to clamp down on hoarders or stockists, yeah, who may be processor, who may be exporter, who may be value chain participant, or that's how it is defined. So, or would it lead to windfall for monopoly traders and companies who speculate on prices? That is the only set of two concerns. Otherwise, it was a central act. It was always there. But there are many reports saying that it's too strict. We need to open up. Now, people from the other side saying there's too much of opening. You can't allow people to play with food, whether perishable or others, because we need it at affordable rates. I would just skip this because this is too much of technical detail. But as I said earlier, the government could have done interstate trade and commerce under the union list entry 42. There's no need to deal with the concurrent list, which is entry 33, where it says that government can intervene, union government can intervene in public interest, yeah, to control such industry, which says trade and commerce. The issue there, a lot of farmer unions and states are raising that agricultural marketing is not trade and commerce. The first transaction which farmer makes in terms of selling her produce to the buyer cannot be called trade and commerce. He's just disposing of what he or she has produced. So that is agricultural marketing transaction, not a trade and commerce activity. So that application of this entry itself is problematic, of course, subject to legal regulation. Contract farming also, there is the union list entry 7, under which you can have this kind of contracts as long as it's not related to agricultural land. And government itself is saying that contract farming is a crop contract, not land contract. So therefore, it could have fit there. And therefore, states like Punjab, Rajasthan, and to some extent even Chhattisgarh have opposed these amendments and new acts by the central government, and also amended at their own level these acts and provided for whatever they thought was desirable. Of course, these amended bills have not been forwarded by the governors to the president, and therefore they're just lying there. Uh, Nothing else. So the entries 14 about agriculture, 18 about land rights, 27 about production and supply of goods, 28 about agriculture loans, and so on. So all these are stateless subjects. Yeah. So they say that government should not have made these laws. Now let's talk about these 2-3 acts quickly. The first act, which is about dealing with the agriculture produce buying from the farmers, it is now called Farmer Produce Trade and Commerce. And I didn't put that subtitle, which is Promotion and Facilitation Act 2020. In popular parlance, we call it APMC Mandi Bypass. Because what it does basically, it restricts the domain of this APMC committee in terms of its regulatory powers only to the physical market yards and sub yards, which have been set up by it. That notified area and notified crop concept is gone. It will not have anything to do with any transaction happening in that notified area if it is happening outside the market yard. It just will not be able to regulate or monitor that now. That new area, that area which is outside the APMC market and sub yard, market yard and sub yard, is now called new trade area. And that be under this act. And in the new trade area, there is no restriction of any kind. Anybody, I think most of you would have this entity proof called PAN card. Anybody with a PAN card, permanent account number for income tax purposes, can go and buy farmer produce. Yeah, I somehow find it's too much of freedom. I call it every Tom, Dick, and Harry should not be allowed to dabble into farmer produce. Yeah, but farmers produce is very big deal for the farmer. It's a 6 months labor, hard work. And just anybody and everybody cannot just say, I want to buy produce, and you don't know who this person is other than the PAN card. Yeah, there can be no taxes in the new trade area by the state government, no mandi fees, no cess, no commissions, nothing. Yeah, so it is basically about creating two market areas, one APMC market area, another new trade area, which are unequal. And that's why there are a lot of worries about whether APMC markets will survive. Because if the buying cost is lower in the APMC, in the new trade area, then over time, various buyers, including, I would say, even the government, FCI, which is hard pressed to reduce its buying costs, may also shift to new trade area to buy directly from farmers and avoid paying any mandi fees or charges or commission to commission agents. Yeah. So that is the worry which has led states like Punjab to raise the concern and take up protests, saying that by default you would end up killing this well-established channel of APMCs, though you are talking about giving channel choice, but after some time it will be only new trade area, private mandi area, you can say, which will remain because APMC will decline it because it had no sort of equal playing field. Because when the buying is costly in APMC, who would go there? No trader would go there, even government may not go there. Yeah. Therefore, in this budget, government has provided for a provision saying that if you want to strengthen the APMC infrastructure, then you can use agriculture infrastructure fund loans to borrow from this fund and build some infrastructure to be competitive and so on. So the issue here is that can agricultural transaction be called trade and commerce? If you go by that logic, then every food and fiber product can be called agricultural transaction, because after all, they remain so, because the ingredient of any food product is basically agricultural raw material. I give this example, it's like the farmer producer organization asking for income tax exemption, saying that they deal with the farmer member produce. Yeah. So I don't think once the entity has bought from farmers, it doesn't remain farmer produce anymore. It becomes your own sort of property. So government had not exempted cooperatives. Dr. Kurian died fighting for it, and income tax is paid by cooperatives. It's only FPOs have been exempted a couple of years back, but that is also not very logical in some way. The biggest problem in this act is that the FPO, which government is spending a lot of money on promoting 10,000 more, we already have about 7,000. They have been treated as farmers only. That is on the supplying side. They can't trade in agriculture produce. They can only sell, which I thought was a disservice. Yeah, they should have got a role on the buying side, because many of them have processing plants, many of them have warehouses, many of them have markets which are well lined up. And even the Act has provided for separate payment rules for FPOs to the farmer sellers. That is like, that was completely unnecessary. That like asking Amul when it should pay its members for the milk they deliver. I feel that cooperative is a member-owned, member-controlled entity. Nobody has any business to tell when it should pay its members. Members decide and members make rules, and members are the boss. So even that kind of things have been brought in, which are completely unnecessary. The big question we were asking earlier about the investments. Now, Bihar has been this new trade area for the last 14 years, since 2006. There's no regulation of any kind. It's a free for all market. Anybody can go and buy, anybody can go and sell, no questions asked. Nobody will ask any question. You don't have to pay, not to pay a single paisa to any government agency or anybody. Yeah. So Bihar without APMCs for 14 years, have we seen any new investments there? Have we seen farmers getting MSP there? And also, can the private actually replace the state? Yeah. Simply because you unregulate or deregulate, does it really help new investment? Does it help farmers, most importantly, because farmers are the weaker parties? Bihar farmers are not even getting MSP for wheat and paddy. Bihar's produce is being siphoned off to Punjab and Haryana to be sold at MSP by traders and so on. So that is the other part here, which is very contradictory, is that we were saying that we are opening up markets. Now we had one state which had completely opened up markets, completely unregulated. Now these new acts are applicable in Bihar also. So I call it re-regulation. Now Bihar has to now frame rules to implement these two acts. So it is that kind of confusion it has created, that kind of contradiction that it created, that you're trying to open up, but in some cases you actually end up re-regulating. Yeah. And the other part is this dispute resolution, which has become a big bone of contention, that earlier APMC, when it used to give licenses to traders to buy, or even used to give licenses to commission agents to operate there, it will take bank guarantees. Yeah, it will take deposits. So if the trader doesn't pay the farmer, then they will compensate the farmer for that money. In this new trade area, there is nobody, no MIBA. The dispute settlement mechanism is at the SDM and DC level. And there are no registration of traders, no bank guarantee, nothing. So you don't know. There are a lot of cases already in states like Madhya Pradesh where traders have bought farmer produce and run away because they just showed the PAN card and nothing else, and payments are still pending. Yeah. Other day there were reports from Gujarat also. A lot of farmers produce bought by some traders and payments are missing. Yeah. So this is the picture from Bihar, the old APMC, which I mean almost like a remnant of what it should have been. And one doesn't see any improvement there in terms of farmer well-being, in terms of price discovery, better prices, lower cost of buying, or help in agriculture growth and development. Yeah, I can give details later if needed, but that's the scenario. And this is the state of affairs in terms of what facilities our mandis have. So it's not that bad. It's not that there's nothing there. A lot of mandis have very good facilities. Some mandis also, like in Gujarat, they run cold storage also. They have set up cold storages. Most of the mandis have go down facility. Yeah, many have, majority have covered platforms. Majority have weighing facilities. Many have drying platforms and so on. Farmer rest houses, toilet facilities and whatnot. So things are not that poor. And this is the thing I was talking about. 23 states allow direct purchase since 2018 up to, by then they had done it. 21 have e-trading allowed. Single point levy of market fee in 23, single trading 22 states. Fruits and vegetable regulation 15, private mandis allowed in 22, farmer consumer market yard, things like Apni Mandi or Raitu Bazaar allowed in 17, contract farming allowed in 20 states. Already this was happening in these major agriculture states before these central acts came in. Yeah, states were also desperate. They were competing with each other to open up these markets. Yeah, so this is data about what happened in MP after this opening up of the new trade area. Yeah, and now let's talk a little bit about contract farming before I stop. Yeah, now this is more contentious actually, because this is something which brings the mandi to the farm, because these big corporates are involved, multinationals are involved, despite the fact that contract farming has been going on. One is that a lot of people are confusing it with corporate farming. As I mentioned earlier, it has nothing to do with that. That corporate farming cannot happen in India as long as we have those state level land ceiling and leasing restriction acts. Yeah, it's also being propagated that contract farming is not beneficial for farmers. Contract farming is always beneficial for farmers if farmer can participate. It is higher cost production, but also returns are higher because you get new seeds, you get new markets, you get quality based price and so on, which you don't get in a mandi. So farmers benefit, but the point is that most of the farmers in India who are small and marginal cannot be eligible to become contract growers in most projects, most companies' cases, because they want bigger farmers, they want to lower their transaction costs, so they don't entertain people with 1, 2, 3 acres. Then they want irrigation facility, they want some other investments farmers should be able to make on the farm, and so on. Therefore, the small farmers simply don't fit into the framework of contract farming. Yeah. The other big worry is that contracting companies would take away farmers' land. You can call it misperception, misconception, but there is some truth in this. So the act clearly says that whatever may happen, the sponsor or the contracting company cannot transfer, cannot lease, cannot mortgage, cannot sell farmers' land. But there is a dispute resolution chapter which has a clause saying that the SDM or DM, if they decide that the farmers are defaulted to the company, then the dues can be recovered as arrears of land revenue. This is what is causing concern among farmers, that our land is not safe. In the 2003 model APMC Act, it was clearly written that whatever defaults farmer may commit, the company cannot lay any claims on farmers' land and assets. Yeah. So that is the worry, and I'll show you some other things, how far it has gone in terms of farmers' fears being genuine to a large extent. Yeah, I'll just skip this. Here, look at how production agreement is defined. It gives you a sense as if there is a hidden agenda of allowing land leasing to the companies. Farmers' land could be leased, which as per law of the land you can't. But the way this definition is there of production agreement, where they say the sponsor agreed to provide farm services either partially and make payment to the farmers for the services rendered by such farmer. Now, what services farmer renders to the company? Company actually renders some services of giving some inputs and extension and so on, and recovering later on and so on. The other is that one state called Rajasthan, when they were trying to amend this bill to make it at their level, they ended up understanding it the way I'm talking about the misperception. They thought that contract farming actually includes land leasing by the company. So they have written like this, that if the company has leased in farmer's land, has employed its workers on his land, then it should remove those workers at the end of the contract period. Otherwise, the company will have to pay some 1,000 rupees per bigha per day penalty. This is official document. State government has also taken it this way, and enacted an amendment saying land leasing okay is part of contract farming, but you should move out when the term is over. So this was never any understanding anywhere globally where land leasing is part of contract farming. I spent 3 decades working on it. In fact, the issue started the Model Contract Farming and Services Act in 2018, which actually said that land leasing is also part of contract farming. I had objected to that time also, but they didn't listen. Yeah, because contract farming never includes land leasing. The contract farming, farmer is the producer of his own land or land he would have on contract or sharecropping, whatever. He does the farming, company buys or supports farming. Company doesn't undertake farming. So leasing means you can also undertake corporate farming. That is what is creating a lot of fear among farmers, saying you are bringing corporate farming under the garb of contract farming. Yeah. So there are a lot of other issues in terms of how direct purchase is brought under this, which should not have been there. Design of the contract is very poor. Basic things are left out. Sophisticated things are left out, and so on. And ultimately, the funniest thing is that when the price thing comes in the contract arrangement, it says other than the minimum price, which is pre-agreed, if the company wants to pay a bonus or premium to the farmer at the end of the harvest, then it should peg that bonus or premium to the local APMC or e-trading price. Now that is sort of not acceptable because you have been saying these mandis don't work well. Now you tell the contracting company to go back to that mandi to find out what is the price, and therefore accordingly it should pay premium. So that should not have been, that is very anti-contract farming in nature. Yeah. Then there is also issue of if the company create some infrastructure on farmers' land or make some modifications, then it has to remove, but it doesn't talk about what happens if the company made a warehouse on my farm, which I don't need, or company made a poultry farm building, and once I moved out of contract, I don't want to do poultry farming. Who will bear the cost of removing those bricks and those sheds? That is also left unattended. The guidelines complicate further. They even say that sharecropper can also be party to contract. And if he's party, then it's he who's responsible for receiving inputs from the company and making good use of them. The guidelines also say that though contract farming disputes cannot be taken to civil courts, but your contract should be as good as it would be under contract law. So very, very confusing scenario. You want to be there, but also you don't want to be there, and so on. And there is also a non-competing clause in the Model Act saying that farmer cannot directly or indirectly compete with the company anywhere in the world. If you have been a contract farming in that farmer in that crop or produce, you simply can't participate in that industry by setting up a processing unit or some other unit or retailing, whatever, which I thought is also very, very unfair to the farmers. As if farmers commit some blunder by moving out of contract farming. Why should you restrict them from moving out of it? FPOs again treated here as farmers. The biggest comment I have on this is that this act is more about facilitation and promotion of contract farming rather than regulation. We still need regulation because we have small farmers who are the weaker party, but this act leaves much to be desired on protecting the small farmer interest. Yeah, I think I would stop here. We will take some questions and we can go further if we have more space in terms of time. Yeah, is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.